Hi, my name is Brendan Gibbons. I'm a science and ag journalism senior, and I was one of the students who learned to fly one of these drones.
And I'm Robert Pertika. I'm under Mike's capstone class. I'm kind of documenting and just tracking the progress of this project for my capstone.
I'm trying to think one of the first things we talked about. I guess we'll get into that. This program is a collaboration we had lots of different groups involved. The MUIT program, Matthew Dickinson was one of the people who helped us design and build the drones, and kind of worked with us, with troubleshooting and repairs when our beginning flights didn't go so well. And Scott Pham with KBIA, the content director, received the grant originally to buy the equipment and to work on developing it for journalism. And Bill Allen, provided the teaching and expertise and editorship that we needed to produce stories for it. So we're really grateful to everyone who was able to help out with this.
The source of funding, if you want to go back and talk about that real quick, we received a huge grant from the Interdisciplinary Fund, which kind of comes from a bunch of student fees and other money they pool from students. And so that was the kind of the big push for the money we started to get these drones off the ground, if that's kind of, so to speak. We also received money from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and then we received a couple $1,000s from the Mizzou Advantage to go on and explore outside of Missouri. They gave us a couple $1,000s to do travel for our reporting outside of the state.
Bill Allen and I took a trip up the Missouri River for a project looking at water issues on the basin as a whole. I'm still working on that project. Should have it up on KBIA very soon. So yeah, we were grateful to Mizzou Advantage to help fund the trip to go up there and to fly drones over the river and to kind of show how the river changes.
So with these drones, they are technically under FAA standards. So one of those main standards with these is they're not for commercial use, meaning that technically the Missourian couldn't have one of these drones because they are a for-profit or they make some sort of income. KBIA, however, since it's an NPR affiliate and they're not profit radio station, they can use these drones legally for their reporting. So that's one of the main concerns that's kind of being argued right now is, who's going to be able to use these drones and how, if they're open to commercial entities, how are they going to be used? So for right now, up until 2015, which is when the FAA is going to kind of start looking at these restrictions and kind of seeing how they're going to change them. Right now, it's just strictly for non-commercial use. These things can only go up to 400 feet under the FAA regulations. Any higher, and it's technically not legal, any higher, and you probably can't see them. So it's also a good thing. You want to maintain these things in sight at all times so you don't lose them. Unpopulated areas is a very big thing as well because we don't want to be flying these things where they can crash and land and hurt people and cause damage. So we've been very sure to fly these things using them for environmental, agricultural purposes. That way they're not in risk of hurting anyone or hurting ourselves or even damaging property and something like that.
Because we are flying as hobbyists under what the FAA is designated as the hobbyist user of this technology, we kind of had an advantage to get to experiment with it in some areas that a commercial journalist might not get a chance to. So it was great to use our status as students working for like a nonprofit goal to be able to work on this. And so it's been great to kind of get the jump on this new technology.
It's very exciting. It's very, we're very much pioneers in this field. Like I said earlier, the FAA is going to reevaluate those regulations as a mandate from Congress in September of 2015. So in a couple years, who knows, TMZ might have these drones, or the New York Times, or other, big papers might be using this technology to report. So we'll see where it goes. Only time will tell. Next slide. Do you want to talk about the class a little bit, or?
Sure. Ethical and legal discussions, as well as one of the big debates we had is like, what do you call this thing? Is it really a drone? Or a drone kind of brings up the idea of like an autonomous vehicle that operates with minimal direction from the user, but really this is something that you have to have extreme control over with a controller. So we kind of toyed with the term JBOT. We've talked about flying cameras, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicle. We kind of decided the drone is probably just in the common lexicon, so we're going to go with that. And then we wanted to figure out how do we use these things legally, ethically, responsibly, and according to like the highest standards of journalism ethics to use a technology that some people don't understand very well yet. I think most people, when they think about drones, still think of, covert drone wars, and weaponized drones. They don't really think of the camera applications of drones for peaceful purposes.
The we've been very sure to make sure we've been 100% transparent in all of our reporting. We have a blog, MissouriDroneJournalism.com, where you can view the class syllabus and read all about it just to make sure, because we've had a lot of people ask questions, what are the legal ramifications of using these drones? What could happen? How could we get in trouble? What's legal, what's not? Is this ethical? What are the privacy concerns? So we've been really, really careful to make sure that we've been able to talk to people and say, well, this is how we're doing it. This is why we're considered ethical. These are our standards. You can look at them, you can talk to us, but we want to make sure that people don't think that we're going to be using these to spy on them, or people are, agriculturalists are also very concerned about, well, if this flies over public property and my farm is captured, how is that not an invasion of my privacy? So there are a lot of concerns about what are the ethics with these drones, and since we're pioneers, we're really just trying to figure everything out. But as of now, we think we have a pretty base set of ethics and standards for the program.
And deliberately focused on stories that dealt with agriculture and the environment, so things that put us flying over public lands. And I think that's a great use of these things, because it lets you see things at the landscape level, kind of looking down on human collective actions as a whole on a landscape, which is, it just works really well with the law and technology of where we are right now.
I think it's actually a good jump to our first video. And if we want to go with that, it's
Yeah, this is a story by Cade Cleveland about a wheat breeding program at Bradford Research Center.
Every single one of these rectangles is a different genetic entity. And every single one of these has the potential to become a new variety. We will ultimately evaluate them for quality, and then for any of the biotic stresses or abiotic stresses that are affecting each of these individual genotypes. So what we're seeing here, each one of these rectangles that you're seeing are experimental lines or genotypes. And what that means is that this is the first time that we've ever seen these varieties which have originated from a genetic cross. So what we do is we look for things that the grower needs: yield, test weight, quality, and then we look for the absence of things that will take away from yield. These are things that we'll evaluate every single one of these plots for, every single one of these genotypes for, and we can extrapolate from the performance of these smaller plots to how it would do in a farmer's field.
There's cantina music in it, but I don't know. So you could see like the use of a drone for this kind of thing was to show the scale of the wheat breeding operation, and it have kind of like a cinematic effect. The researchers at Bradford came up with a totally different use of it. They thought that they might, they have optical sensors that can tell the color of a plant and then determine from that how much nitrogen fertilizer needs to be applied. So, I mean, some of the ideas that they were coming up with were, a lot more, they had a lot more of like a scientific aspect than what we did. But, so they liked the idea of like putting a camera and flying over there to do precision fertilizer application.
The thing with this video is actually it was published alongside a text article on KBIA's website as of yesterday. And so that's one of these things that we're using these videos for, is kind of supplementary content for our reporting. This way, the viewers can see just how these wheat species are growing and what how the research is really being done. And so with a drone, we're able to take this aerial view and kind of explain to the reader and explain to the viewer, this is what how this works. This is what it looks like. A helicopter imagery is very, very expensive. So these drones, they cost relatively they're relatively cheap, $1,200, and they can fly over and get a precise aerial image, whereas something up like an airplane or a satellite image is a lot grainier, a lot grittier, and it's a lot more expensive. So that's one of the benefits of these drones is that they're cheap and they're quick and they get the job done pretty well.
This next story is a prescribed prairie burn on Tucker Prairie, which is one of the last original unplowed pieces of prairie in Missouri.
We know prairie is only maintained if you get periodic fires. If you don't burn, then it'll turn into forest. And a lot of this is native. I mean, this has never been plowed, which is critical. The minute you plow it, you lose hundreds of species. If you let woody species come in, it's no longer a prairie. This is a native grassland. Produces a lot of seed. Some of these big blue stem grasses are probably 1,000 years old. When they put the interstate in, we lost a few acres to the interstate. Got to keep it under control. And even though this year we don't have much fuel, you can feel how hot that fire is. Because once you start it, it's really hard to put it out. If you put in good fire lanes, you have the right crew. Hope the wind holds. Right, we've had runaway fires a couple of times. The wind shifted on us. You want to get rid of woody growth because woody growth will take over. But if you burn it too often, then you favor the warm season grasses. In a wet year, the grasses will be up to here and the seed heads will be up over my head. I have about 300 species of plants here. There isn't a whole lot of replacement by seed because these plants can live forever and ever. They're adapted to fire.
Every drone video's got to have a song so far. I don't know if that's really true, but because if you use the natural sound from that, it's just like this constant like humming of the propellers. So
we'd love to show you what it's like in air, but due to safety concerns, turning one of these on in such a confined area, it goes against our ethics, so to speak.
Yeah, since we don't have 35 pairs of safety glasses.
We thought we'd keep this guided for now. Mm. This next video was actually produced by one of the capstone students under Mike, like I am. Jamie Cook produced this video, and it's kind of like a behind the scenes, and it talks with Brendan and what it's like to fly one of these drones.
When Bill invited me to do this class, the first real use I thought of was flying over forest fires. It was kind of a proof that you could fly over a fire and it wouldn't destroy the equipment. One of the things I was worried about is hot air rising really fast, and you can even just see it, the shimmering air above the flames. There was one shot that I did that I flew really low over some flames and then tried to keep it low, but I just couldn't because the air was rising so fast, and within a few seconds I was hundreds of feet in the air. The more you fly it, the more you're able to put your imagination into the cockpit, and you have to because you have to steer as if you're in the cockpit, just with your right hand. I think of the drone as sort of a macroscope, and so you don't really see individuals, you see our collective actions on the landscape. I think that's why this tool is really useful, because once you're up above that high, you can see how much human actions have changed everything.
And with that video, we know you probably all have a bunch of really interesting questions, so we hope to answer any of them if you guys would like to ask anything.
You have a microphone. Please put your hand up so we can bring the mic to you if you'd like to ask a question. I'll just ask the basic one to get started. What have you learned about how much control there is, as this little mini dock piece at the end sort of suggested, and what can you do to try to ensure as much as possible that you're getting the shots that you want when you're flying the drone?
We use the GoPro camera, which I don't think we have one right now with us, but about 3 or 4 inches long, and it connects to a app that you can download for any smartphone or tablet, and it has a preview function on there, so you can look. If you have that selected, you can see with like a half-second to a full-second delay what's going on. So that kind of helps you like set up the shot. That we've had some problems with that. Sometimes the GoPro is a little glitchy. There are ways to begin first-person flying, and that's something we haven't gotten into because it's a lot more complicated. Some of the frequencies that you use for broadcasting that level of information in real time, you would require a ham radio license to use. So there are possibilities of wearing something like Google glasses or some other like glasses with a screen on them and really like seeing out the cockpit. I hope that that's where people decide to go in the future because there's a lot more applications for that.
These flights just have to be extremely pre-calculated just because the battery life on these drones is relatively short, 15 to 20 minutes. So every flight that you make, you really have to plan ahead of time. What shot am I going to get? Where am my target? What do I need getting in the air from this drone? So it requires a lot of pre-calculation. So we're not just flying up there and kind of surveillance. These things are very pre-planned and calculated just so we can get what we need and get back down on the ground before the battery dies and the drone crashes to the ground. So.
Question or comment for the team? Brian, back here, and let's wait for the microphone.
Are you streaming this to a device on the ground, and if so, what's your range for that?
Usually we've been flying blind kind of, so just going up there and then bringing it back down, removing the memory device and then putting it into the computer and downloading it and then taking a look and then flying again. Like when the GoPro linking with the smartphone or tablet, that I think the range on that is maybe like, it's been like 200 feet maybe. So it's about the range of flight. We don't really get much above 250 feet. It's very difficult to see the drone at that point. It just looks like a speck. So,
so you're both basically recording to a memory card?
Yeah, an SD card. It's a micro SD card in the GoPros that it records to.
And it'll record for the full 15 minutes of the battery?
Yeah, pretty much. So you have to, then you look at the whole video and you have to kind of scroll through to see which shots you got.
Do you see that changing from a memory card to actual streaming?
To do that, you would need to, well, the actual streaming, it can be done now to the smartphone or tablet, but there's a slight delay. For real-time streaming, you would need a different type of broadcast signal, one that's more powerful, one that you would need permission from the FCC to use. So that's where the ham radio license comes in for that.
The GoPros have the wireless built in. They have a kind of like a wireless access point or like a little router, so they can connect to the internet themselves, so they can stream. But like Brendan said, it's a 1 to 2 second delay. And in terms of flying something, a lot can go wrong in 1 to 2 seconds. And so that's why we haven't actually used that yet. Matthew Dickinson, our IT guy and the one who builds all these drones, has been toying with kind of having a kind of like a tablet and then having real-time video, but like, it has that delay. And so for that reason, he doesn't feel comfortable with us using it just because these things could, crash in 1 to 2 seconds, and it's just not the safest way to fly these drones is with real-time video.
But the IT program, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, has first-person flying capabilities, right? I think we've seen that before. So there are people at the university who are able to do it that way. I think future classes who are interested in this would be able to do it. They just have to, it's just an extra step aside from flying, is learning how to use that technology.
You all, the team, have been in the news as well as covering the news, and some of those stories have been very benign, like the night piece on NBC or the story that appeared in the Kansas City Star. But you've also been involved in discussions in the state legislature about whether or not to restrict the use of drones. So say a little bit more about how comfortable or uncomfortable you were and what issues have arisen as state lawmakers try to rein in some of these applications.
So what Mike is referring to is that drones are they're very big buzzwords, and so agriculturalists, there have been rumors that the EPA has been using drones to kind of spy on farmers who are committing pollution or doing not unethical, but kind of committing they're not doing the most cleanly ways of farming. And so for that reason, a lot of other states have passed kind of like ag laws to prevent journalists from using technology that could surveillance or record farmers doing things. And so the Missouri State House recently passed a bill that would restrict drones being used in agricultural or being used for surveillance on any private farm, or even if they're flying on public land. Anything recorded on a private farm would be considered a crime, and so we get punished for that. I don't.
That bill has passed the Missouri House, but it's in the Senate right now. I don't know if I can. I mean, I don't know if I can really say much about that bill. I just think we'll see what happens with that. I do think that if people try to restrict these for journalists' use, they will end up restricting it for the general public as a whole. A journalist is not special under the law.
What would the ideal legislation look like that would allow journalists to use this kind of thing in an urban environment but would still protect the rights of private citizens?
Great.
I'm not sure if that's something that the state can decide. I mean, I'm definitely not a lawyer, but yeah, well, I mean, I think that's something that the FAA will decide because they regulate the airspace. Like, so, if there wouldn't really be so you're asking like what would be the best set of rules to allow it to happen in an urban area?
For example, if you wanted to essentially lobby for yourself, or if you were to talk to lobbyists, how would you want the rules set up so that you take those things into consideration as a journalist?
Maybe we'll let Bill take that on, because it's been a very sort of sensitive issue as to how we position ourselves when these kinds of laws are being debated, and we're kind of in the center of the eye there.
Yeah, we are in the center. As Bill Allen, I teach the course, and my partner in crime here is Scott Pham to my left. It's complicated. Right now, what you need to know, and what it appears many legislators in Missouri and many other states don't seem to know, is the current law, which affects private property already and protects private property owners. U.S. Code says that if you own private property, you own the airspace up to 500 feet above that, and so that anyone who goes in there without your permission is effectively trespassing. The FAA does regulate all airspace in the United States, and Brendan's right. They have the say-so in that regard. So the question then becomes, how high up above your property do you need to have privacy rights for any aircraft, not just drones? And that's open to discussion. And I think if you wanted an answer to your specific question, which is the question, it's really, really well stated. As speaking as a journalist, I think that to regulate via state legislation access to airspace for journalistic purposes is going to run straight into the First Amendment. We don't, according to our professional ethics, don't spy on people. We don't invade private property. We are very careful with considerations of our sources, but it is true, just like you can stand on a public street or sidewalk and take a picture of someone's home, that we ought to be able to fly down a public road or in some public property and make pictures and video of everything we see. And what the current law would effectively do is say you can't, if you happen to be doing a story and you happen to have a piece of a farm in your shot, we can sue you. So that's going to run into some trouble. I also wanted to clarify the detail on a claim that has been repeated by politicians around the country that is false. And that is, and Robert was good in his description, about the EPA spying. In general, it was an effective description. What's being said by the politicians is that EPA has used drones to spy on farmers in the United States. The fact is, and AP did a very good story in which they actually talked to the EPA and other sources, the fact is that over a period of 4 years, from about 2008 to 2012, EPA did fly light planes over parts of Iowa and Nebraska, not drones, planes, to observe and photograph practices where water pollution was flowing into, or was suspected of flowing into, streams and rivers, which are public waterways, and polluting the water supply. And in fact, by doing this, EPA found several dozen, more than 50, violations of federal law, clean water law. So for politicians to be saying that drones were used or that the EPA was spying, EPA was merely enforcing the law. And so what the politicians, if you ever run into this and say, and they use that drones spying routine, they are lying, they're flat out lying, and I hope you'll correct the record. That has been said in the Missouri legislature, by the way.
Bill, you introduced Scott, and Scott, we literally have about 2 minutes before our next presentation, but could you say just briefly what your experience has been with this tool as something that public radio or public media can use going forward?
Yeah, well, you know, something that people always ask is like, how are we going to get this on the radio? And so far, we have declined to get it on the radio. And I think there's possibilities of using it to build radio stories, but right now, we're using it mainly as a web story and mainly as like an added value element to add to our web content. And right now, I think that's good. Right now, I think that's actually a good thing that we can build on. And we've gotten a lot of support in the public radio community about that. People seem excited about that because public radio in general, we are trying to think of ourselves less as tied to the radio medium and more as news organizations that work on all platforms wherever we can be.
Great, thank you. Obviously, you're going to hear a lot more about this. We hope that we can find some additional funding to keep the drone journalism program alive into the next year. And if you have any thoughts or questions for the team afterwards, feel free to do so. And you want to say very briefly, guys,
Bill
the
wants me to
course
make a
next
plug.
semester?
This actually is a course. It's available to undergraduates and graduate students for next fall. And so it's Science and Investigative Reporting / Journalism. The course number is Journalism 4415, Science and Ag J Journalism 4415. And so we have flyers outside on the table if any students are interested. And there's space available, I believe, in the course. There's spaces available, correct, Bill? Yeah, so there's plenty of space. So if anyone's interested, Bill and Scott are around, I'm around, Brendan's around. So feel free to ask us questions.
Thank you, guys.